Jasmine Washington stood drenched in Coca-Cola, dark liquid dripping from her designer suit onto the airplane carpet. Passengers gasped. Flight attendants smirked. Nobody knew her quiet phone call wasn't to her therapist. It was to her husband, tech billionaire Devin Washington, who owned the entire airline. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination or stood up against injustice. The way this powerful black couple turns humiliation into revolution will leave you speechless. Dr. Jasmine Washington woke up at exactly 5:30 in the morning, her mind already racing through the presentation she would deliver at the International Neurosurgical Conference in Chicago. As one of the youngest department heads at Atlanta Memorial Hospital, Jasmine had pioneered a revolutionary technique for treating previously inoperable brain tumors. Today should have been about celebrating her achievements. Instead, it would become another battle in her lifelong war against prejudice. "You got this," she whispered to herself in the mirror, adjusting the collar of her crisp white blouse beneath her tailored navy suit. Her reflection showed a confident professional, Harvard Medical School graduate, published researcher, and saving lives daily. Yet no matter how many degrees hung on her wall, or lives she saved with her skilled hands, society still saw her, skin color first. The Uber driver that morning had asked if she was heading to a job interview when she mentioned the airport. The security agent had pulled her aside for random screening while waving through white travelers in business attire. Small indignities that Jasmine had learned to navigate with grace. "Your boarding pass, ma'am," said the gate agent at Atlantic Airways, scanning her ticket with a smile. "You're all set for flight 2187 to Chicago. Enjoy your flight in first class." At least that interaction had gone smoothly. Jasmine wheeled her carry-on toward the jet bridge, mentally rehearsing key points from her presentation. The breakthrough surgical approach she'd developed had increased survival rates by 37%. Those numbers meant everything. Mothers who would see their children grow up, fathers who would walk daughters down aisles, children who would have futures. Stepping onto the plane, Jasmine smiled warmly at the flight attendant greeting passengers. "Welcome aboard," said the young man whose name tag read Tyler Brooks. His eyes flicked to her first-class ticket, and his smile faltered almost imperceptibly. Jasmine found her seat, 2A, a window seat in the first row of first class. She stowed her presentation materials carefully in the overhead compartment, keeping only her tablet for last-minute review. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice. A flight attendant with graying blonde hair pulled into a tight bun loomed over her. Her name tag read, Beverly Winters. "This is the first-class cabin." Jasmine smiled politely. "Yes, I know. Seat 2A. She gestured to her seat. Beverly's eyes narrowed. "May I see your boarding pass?" "Of course." Jasmine handed over her boarding pass, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the all-too-familiar interaction. Beverly scrutinized the pass, turning it over as though expecting to find it counterfeit. "And your ID as well, please." Jasmine noticed that Beverly hadn't asked for ID verification from the elderly white couple who had boarded just before her, nor from the middle-aged white businessman settling into 2C across the aisle. Nevertheless, she reached for her wallet and produced her driver's license. Beverly examined it closely, comparing the photo to Jasmine's face with exaggerated care. "Dr. Washington," she finally acknowledged, handing back the documents with obvious reluctance. "We just need to make sure everyone's in their assigned seats." "Of course," Jasmine replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I understand." As Beverly moved away, another flight attendant, a younger woman whose name tag read Shannon Miller, whispered something to Beverly while glancing back at Jasmine. Both women shared a look that Jasmine recognized all too well. The white businessman across from her received a warm welcome as he settled in. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Coffee? Water? Orange juice?" Beverly's tone had transformed entirely, oozing with hospitality. "Coffee black," the man replied without looking up from his phone. "Right away, Mr. Coleman," Beverly responded, though Jasmine hadn't heard him provide his name. Jasmine took a deep breath, reminding herself of what her grandmother had taught her. "Your excellence is your resistance," the wise woman had said. Every achievement is a brick in the wall they try to put around you. This was hardly the first time she'd been questioned about belonging in spaces she had every right to occupy. During her residency, a patient had once refused to believe she was the doctor, insisting on speaking to the real physician, despite the white coat and ID badge clearly stating Jasmine Washington, MD. At a medical conference last year, she'd been mistaken for waitstaff 3 times in a single evening. Her husband Devin often joked that between the two of them, they could write an encyclopedia of microaggressions. Devin. The thought of her husband brought a slight smile to her face. While she headed to Chicago for her conference, he was in San Francisco closing a major acquisition for Washington Innovations, the tech empire he'd built from a dorm room startup to a global powerhouse. They'd been married 5 years, each supporting the other's ambitions while navigating the additional hurdles society placed before them as successful Black professionals. Jasmine discreetly took out her phone and opened her secure notes app. Flight 2187, ATLORD, she typed. Head FA Beverly Winters, selective ID verification. She had learned to document these incidents meticulously, not to dwell on them, but because patterns revealed truths that isolated incidents could obscure. The aircraft filled with remaining passengers. Jasmine noticed that Beverly and the other attendants warmly greeted every white passenger in first class, yet barely acknowledged the only other person of color, an Asian woman who took the seat behind Jasmine. As the boarding door closed and the safety demonstration began, Jasmine centered herself. She would not allow this to disturb her focus on the conference. Hundreds of future patients were counting on her research, whether they knew it yet or not. That mattered more than the small-minded behavior of a flight attendant. What she couldn't know was how quickly this routine flight would escalate from minor indignities to a confrontation that would change not just her day, but an entire industry. The aircraft reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and Beverly began the first-class beverage service. She moved methodically down the cabin, starting with the elderly white couple in 1A and 1B, then crossing to Richard Coleman in 2C. "What can I get you to drink, Mr. Coleman?" Beverly asked warmly. "Scotch, neat," he replied, barely looking up from his laptop. "Certainly, sir." Beverly nodded, continuing her service to the passengers in row 3. Jasmine waited patiently, noticing that Beverly had skipped her entirely. Perhaps it was an oversight. After serving the final passenger in first class, except Jasmine, Beverly turned to head back to the galley. "Excuse me," Jasmine called politely. "I haven't been offered a drink." Beverly turned slowly. "Oh," she said flatly. "What would you like?" "Sparkling water with lime, please," Jasmine replied. "We're out of sparkling water," Beverly responded immediately, though Jasmine had clearly seen her serve it to another passenger moments earlier. "Regular water is fine then," Jasmine said, maintaining her composure. Beverly nodded curtly and returned to the galley. Minutes later, Shannon delivered a plastic cup of water to Jasmine. No ice, no napkin, unlike the carefully prepared drinks with proper glassware that the other first-class passengers had received. "Thank you," Jasmine said, meeting Shannon's eyes directly. The younger flight attendant looked away quickly. Jasmine sipped her water and returned to reviewing her presentation. The cabin experienced a brief moment of turbulence, causing the aircraft to dip and sway. Several passengers gasped. Beverly, who had been serving hot towels, stumbled slightly near Jasmine's seat. "Oh," Beverly exclaimed as water spilled directly onto Jasmine's lap. "These things happen when we hit bumps." Jasmine reached for the cocktail napkin, dabbing at the wet spot on her slacks. "Could I have some more napkins, please?" "Of course," Beverly replied with an insincere smile. "These things tend to happen to certain people." The emphasis on certain people wasn't subtle. As Beverly walked away, the Asian woman seated behind Jasmine leaned forward. "That was completely deliberate," she whispered. "I saw her tilt the tray." Surprised, Jasmine turned to face the woman, who continued in a low voice. "I'm Andrea Chen. I fly this route every week for work, and I've seen how that flight attendant operates." "Thanks for saying something," Jasmine whispered back. "I'm Jasmine Washington." "Dr. Washington," Andrea corrected with a smile. I recognized you from your TED Talk on neuroplasticity. I work in medical device development. Their conversation was interrupted when Tyler approached with the meal service menu. He handed one to Richard Coleman with a friendly smile, then tossed one onto Jasmine's tray table without making eye contact. As Jasmine reviewed the menu, she overheard Beverly and Shannon talking in the galley, their voices carrying more than they realized. "Can you believe she's in first?" Beverly muttered. "Probably using her husband's miles or something. They never earn these things themselves." "The entitlement," Shannon agreed. "Did you see that designer bag? Probably a knockoff." Jasmine felt her cheeks burn, but kept her eyes fixed on the menu. This was nothing new. The assumption that her presence in premium spaces must be explained by something other than her own success. Across the aisle, Richard Coleman had been watching the interactions with interest. As the drink service continued, he received his second scotch and began speaking loudly on his phone despite the announcements about keeping calls brief out of courtesy. "Yeah, Bob, I'm stuck next to one of them on this flight," he said, his voice carrying clearly to Jasmine's seat. "You know how they are in first class, acting like they belong." Jasmine put on her noise-canceling headphones, attempting to block out his conversation. But moments later, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Coleman had reached across the aisle. "Hey, sweetheart," he said when she removed one earphone. "Could you ask the attendant for another drink when she comes by? She really likes you." He winked, his breath already heavy with alcohol. "Please don't touch me," Jasmine said firmly. "And I'm not sweetheart. I'm Dr. Washington." Coleman's face darkened. "Just trying to be friendly. No need to get all uppity about it." Jasmine replaced her headphone and returned to her work, but Coleman continued making increasingly loud comments to nearby passengers about attitude problems and knowing your place. When his behavior escalated to humming loudly and occasionally, bumping her armrest, Jasmine pressed the flight attendant call button. The light illuminated, but no one came. After 5 minutes, she pressed it again. Still nothing. Andrea leaned forward again. "They're ignoring your call button. I'm taking a photo of this." She discreetly snapped a picture with her phone, showing the illuminated button and the flight attendants chatting in the galley, clearly visible and obviously ignoring the call. After 10 full minutes, Jasmine pressed the button a third time. Finally, Tyler approached with visible reluctance. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone suggesting the problem was Jasmine herself. "Yes," Jasmine replied calmly. "The passenger across from me has been making inappropriate comments and deliberately disturbing me. I'd appreciate if you could address the situation." Tyler glanced at Coleman, who immediately adopted an innocent expression. "I'm sure Mr. Coleman doesn't mean any harm," Tyler said dismissively. "We're all just trying to have a pleasant flight. I've asked him not to touch me and he continues to reach across the aisle," Jasmine persisted. "And he's been making racist comments." Tyler's expression hardened. "That's a very serious accusation, ma'am. I haven't heard anything inappropriate." "Of course you haven't," Jasmine replied. "You've been in the galley ignoring my call button for the past 10 minutes. "We have multiple passengers to attend to," Tyler said defensively. "Your call was not being ignored." From behind, Andrea spoke up. "I have photos showing otherwise." Tyler's face flushed. "Please stay out of this, ma'am. This doesn't concern you." As Tyler walked away without addressing Coleman's behavior, other passengers began to take notice of the situation. A middle-aged white woman across the aisle leaned toward Jasmine. "I heard what he said to you. It was completely inappropriate." Another passenger nodded in agreement. "I've been watching that flight attendant skip over you repeatedly. It's not right." Coleman, hearing these comments, raised his voice further. "Can't even take a joke anymore in this country. Everything's racist this, offensive that." The tension in the first-class cabin was building palpably, and Jasmine could feel the eyes of passengers on her. Some sympathetic, others judgmental, all watching to see how she would react. But this wasn't her first encounter with public racism, and she knew that maintaining her dignity was often her only available weapon. What no one on that flight could have guessed was that this apparently powerless moment was about to trigger a chain of events that would reshape an entire industry. The match had been struck. The explosion was coming. The meal service began as the flight continued toward Chicago. Beverly meticulously served each first-class passenger with practiced precision. Crisp white linen spread across tray tables, warm bread offered from a basket, wine poured with a flourish. Everyone, that is, except Jasmine. When Beverly finally reached Jasmine's seat, she dropped a tray unceremoniously. "Here's your meal." Jasmine looked down at her tray. The chicken was cold, the vegetables soggy, and the wrong side dish entirely from what she had ordered. "Excuse me," Jasmine said quietly. "I ordered the salmon, not chicken." Beverly's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We're all out of salmon. Someone has to get the chicken." Jasmine glanced around the cabin, noting that the white passenger in 3B had been served salmon just moments earlier, despite boarding after her. "I see," Jasmine replied, maintaining her composure. "May I at least have the correct side dish? I ordered the quinoa salad, not mashed potatoes." Beverly sighed dramatically. "The meals come pre-assembled. There's nothing I can do about it now." As Beverly walked away, Richard Coleman accidentally bumped Jasmine's arm while reaching for his napkin, causing her water to spill onto her tray. "Oops," he said with a smirk. "Clumsy me." "Could I have some napkins, please?" Jasmine called to Beverly, who was still nearby. Beverly returned with a single cocktail napkin, dropping it onto Jasmine's tray with obvious reluctance. "Here you go." Coleman chuckled loudly. "Some people just attract messes, don't they? Must be something in their nature." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably at the obviously racist comment. Jasmine took a deep breath, placed her napkin over the spill, and addressed Beverly directly. "I'd like to speak with the purser, please." "The what?" Beverly asked, feigning confusion. "The purser," Jasmine repeated firmly. "The head of the cabin crew." Beverly's lips thinned. "I'll see if he's available." 10 minutes passed before a tall man with graying temples appeared at Jasmine's seat. His name tag identified him as William Thompson, purser. "I understand there's an issue," he asked, his tone suggesting the issue was Jasmine herself. Jasmine explained the situation clearly and concisely. The selective ID verification, the skipped service, the deliberate water spill, the wrong meal, and the racist comments from Coleman that the crew had ignored. William listened with a neutral expression, then replied, "Ms. Washington." "Dr. Washington," Jasmine corrected. "Dr. Washington," he amended with visible annoyance. "I've known Beverly for 15 years. She's one of our most experienced flight attendants. I find it hard to believe she would deliberately provide poor service." "I can confirm everything," she's saying, Andrea interjected from the seat behind. "I've been documenting the entire interaction." William turned to Andrea with a stern expression. "Ma'am, please stay out of this. This is between the crew and Dr. Washington." "The crew is wrong," said another passenger, the middle-aged woman who had noticed the pattern earlier. "I've been watching this whole flight. The service discrepancy is blatant." William's face hardened. "I appreciate everyone's concern, but Atlantic Airways has procedures for handling complaints. If Dr. Washington feels she's received inadequate service, she's welcome to file a formal complaint upon landing." "And what about the ongoing harassment from this passenger?" Jasmine asked, gesturing toward Coleman. William glanced at Coleman, who immediately adopted an innocent expression. "Mr. Coleman is a platinum member and flies with us weekly. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Are you seeing what's happening here? Comment number 1 if you've ever been in a situation where those with authority refuse to acknowledge discrimination happening right in front of them. Hit like if you believe organizations should hold employees accountable for prejudiced behavior. Would you have spoken up like Andrea did or stayed silent like most passengers? Subscribe if you want to see what happens when justice finally catches up to Beverly and her crew." "A misunderstanding?" Jasmine repeated, her voice steady despite her rising frustration. "He referred to me as sweetheart, touched me without permission, and made explicitly racist comments." "I didn't hear any racist comments," William replied. "Because you weren't here," Jasmine pointed out. "Multiple passengers witnessed it." William's demeanor grew increasingly defensive. Dr. Washington, I understand you're upset, but causing a disruption on this flight. I'm not causing a disruption, Jasmine interrupted, her professional calm finally showing cracks. I'm being disrupted. There's a difference. Beverly returned holding a stack of papers. William, I think we need to document this. She's becoming hostile and threatening the crew. Threatening? Jasmine asked incredulously. I haven't threatened anyone. Your tone and manner are becoming aggressive, Beverly insisted. We have protocols for passengers who create unsafe environments. The accusation hung in the air, the deliberate inversion of victim and perpetrator that Jasmine had encountered throughout her life. How quickly a black woman asking to be treated with basic dignity became aggressive, hostile, threatening. Jasmine thought back to a conversation with Devon after a similar incident at a hotel last year. They'd been denied the presidential suite they'd reserved, with the manager insisting it was already occupied, until a white couple arrived minutes later and were escorted directly to it. Sometimes I just want to tell them who we are, Jasmine had said afterward in their hastily reassigned junior suite. Wave your net worth in their faces like a weapon. Devon had taken her hands in his. And sometimes I want that too. But then they'd treat us with respect because of money, not because we deserve it as human beings. The system stays broken that way. So we document, Jasmine had concluded. We gather evidence. And then we change things systematically. Now, facing Beverly's false accusations and William's willing complicity, Jasmine maintained her resolve. She wouldn't descend to their level, but she wouldn't back down either. I'd like all of your full names for my complaint, Jasmine stated calmly. And I'd like it noted that I've requested to be moved to a different seat to avoid further harassment, and that request has been ignored. William's face reddened. There are no other available seats in first class. Then economy, Jasmine replied. I'd rather sit in economy with respectful people than here. Beverly's smile turned triumphant. I'll prepare the documentation for your voluntary downgrade. But this small victory for the crew would be terribly short-lived. The true breaking point was yet to come, and when it did, it would shatter the careers of everyone involved. Richard Coleman ordered his third Coca-Cola and whiskey of the flight, his voice growing louder with each passing minute. Beverly served him promptly, offering a warm smile and fresh ice without being asked. The contrast with her treatment of Jasmine couldn't have been more stark. Another for my friend here, Coleman called, gesturing to his empty glass as Tyler passed by 15 minutes later. Keep 'em coming. Right away, Mr. Coleman, Tyler replied, hurrying to fulfill the request despite airline policies about monitoring alcohol consumption. Jasmine had retreated into her presentation, putting on noise-canceling headphones to focus on her work. Her laptop displayed slides showing complex neurological scans, her life's work that had saved dozens of previously untreatable patients. Tomorrow she would present these findings to 500 of the world's top neurosurgeons. Despite the hostility surrounding her on this flight, those patients and future ones deserved her full concentration. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Beverly and Shannon whispering in the galley, occasionally glancing in her direction and sharing knowing smiles. The behavior was childish, reminiscent of middle school bullies rather than professionals responsible for passenger safety. Jasmine forced herself to refocus on her presentation. Coleman rose unsteadily to his feet, squeezing past his seatmate, to head toward the lavatory. On his return journey, he stumbled noticeably, using seatbacks for support. When he reached Jasmine's row, he lurched dramatically. Jasmine, deep in concentration, didn't notice his approach until a shadow fell across her laptop. She glanced up, removing one earphone. "Excuse me, you're blocking," she began. The words died in her throat as Coleman tripped, sending his full cup of Coca-Cola and whiskey cascading directly onto Jasmine. The dark liquid drenched her white blouse and navy blazer, splashed across her laptop keyboard, and soaked the medical documents she'd been reviewing. Gasps erupted throughout the cabin. Jasmine sat frozen in shock, cola dripping from her hair, onto her ruined clothing. "Whoopsie," Coleman slurred with exaggerated concern that didn't mask his smirk. "So sorry about that," Hard to see certain people in dim lighting, you know. Beverly rushed forward, not to help Jasmine, but to steady. Coleman. Are you all right, Mr. Coleman? Here, let me help you back to your seat. Shannon appeared with a handful of napkins, which she handed to Coleman despite him being completely dry. Do you need anything, sir? Jasmine sat drenched and stunned as the crew fussed over her assailant. Finally, Tyler approached with a few cocktail napkins, woefully inadequate for the scale of the spill. Here, he said, dropping them on her tray table, careful not to touch her wet belongings. My laptop, Jasmine said, trying to save her device and presentation materials. I need towels, paper towels, anything. We have limited supplies, Beverly replied, returning from settling Coleman. Maybe if you hadn't extended your legs into the aisle, Mr. Coleman wouldn't have tripped. The blatant victim blaming broke through Jasmine's professional reserve. My legs were not in the aisle. He deliberately poured his drink on me and you know it. That's a serious accusation, William said, suddenly appearing. Mr. Coleman is a valued customer who simply had an accident. It wasn't an accident, came Andrea's voice from behind. I recorded the whole thing. He aimed for her. Other passengers began to speak up. I saw it too, said the woman across the aisle. He was looking right at her when he did it. He's been making racist comments the entire flight, added a young man from 2 rows back. This is outrageous, said an elderly gentleman. I've never seen such unprofessional conduct from a flight crew. The cabin quickly divided, those who had witnessed the ongoing discrimination rallying to Jasmine's defense, while others, including several who had slept through earlier events, sided with the crew out of automatic deference to authority. I want to file an incident report, Jasmine stated firmly, trying to salvage her soaked belongings. This was a deliberate assault. We'll have forms available after landing, William replied dismissively. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to visit the lavatory to clean up. The suggestion carried clear subtext. Get out of sight. Stop making a scene. Jasmine stood, dignity intact despite her dripping clothes, and made her way to the lavatory. As she passed, Beverly whispered to Shannon just loudly enough to be heard. Some people just don't know how to behave in first class. Inside the tiny lavatory, Jasmine surveyed the damage. Her presentation outfit was ruined. The laptop containing her presentation might be permanently damaged. The meticulous notes she'd planned to reference were soaked through, the ink bleeding into illegibility. Tears threatened, but she refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, she pulled out her phone, mercifully protected in her pocket, and made a call that would change everything. The phone rang 3 times before connecting. Hey, babe, came Devin Washington's warm voice. How's the flight? Devin, Jasmine said, her voice finally breaking slightly. Something happened. In their 5 years of marriage, Devin had rarely heard that tone from his resilient wife. Jasmine had faced down medical emergencies, stood firm against dismissive colleagues, and navigated countless racist encounters with unwavering strength. The slight tremor in her voice now immediately put him on high alert. Tell me everything, he said, his voice turning serious. Jasmine recounted the events of the flight, the initial suspicion from Beverly, the escalating discriminatory treatment, Coleman's harassment, and finally, the deliberate Coca-Cola incident. As she spoke, she dampened paper towels and did her best to blot the stains from her clothing. What airline? Devin asked, his tone deceptively calm. Atlantic Airways, Flight 2187 from Atlanta to Chicago. There was a brief pause on the line. Atlantic Airways, Devin repeated slowly. What Jasmine didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that 6 months earlier, Washington Innovations had quietly acquired Atlantic Airways as part of a diversified investment strategy. The acquisition had been conducted through a complex series of holding companies, with minimal publicity at Devin's insistence. He had planned to implement gradual improvements to the airline's technology infrastructure and customer experience, keeping his ownership deliberately low profile. Are you still there? Jasmine asked after the silence stretched. I'm here, Devin replied, his voice now controlled in a way Jasmine recognized from his most intense business negotiations. I need you to do something for me. Is there anyone on the flight who witnessed what happened and might be willing to provide a statement? Yes, several passengers spoke up. The woman behind me, Andrea Chen, has been documenting everything. She even recorded Coleman pouring the drink on me. Good. And the crew members' names? Beverly Winters, Shannon Miller, Tyler Brooks, and the purser is William Thompson. Jasmine heard the soft click of keyboard keys on Devin's end. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. I need you to return to your seat with your head held high. Don't engage further with the crew or with Coleman. I'm handling this, but I need about 20 minutes. Handling it how? Jasmine asked. Devin, I don't want special treatment just because. This isn't about special treatment, Devin interrupted gently. This is about accountability. No one should experience what you're experiencing, regardless of who they're married to. The fact that you happen to be my wife just means the accountability will come more swiftly. Jasmine sighed. I'm giving my presentation tomorrow. My laptop is soaked, my notes are ruined, and now my suit looks like I went swimming in a soda fountain. I'll have replacement equipment and clothing waiting when you land, Devin assured her. Your presentation is saved to our cloud drive, right? Yes, but then focus on getting through the next hour with your dignity intact, which I know you can do better than anyone. I've got everything else. As they ended the call, Devin Washington was already sending texts to his executive team, setting in motion a response that would reverberate throughout the entire airline industry. Jasmine returned to her seat, cola-stained but composed. She noticed several passengers watching her with sympathy, while others averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the visible evidence of what had transpired. Beverly made an announcement as Jasmine settled back in her seat. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to remind all passengers that maintaining a civil environment is everyone's responsibility. Disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. As she spoke, she looked pointedly at Jasmine, inverting reality in a way that was both infuriating and sadly familiar. Minutes later, Tyler approached Richard Coleman. Sir, we have an available seat in our premium section that might be more comfortable. For you, would you like to move? Coleman smirked at Jasmine as he gathered his belongings. Absolutely. The current seating arrangement has become uncomfortable. As Coleman was escorted to his new seat, away from the situation he had created, Andrea leaned forward and passed a folded note to Jasmine. I have everything recorded, the note read. My contact info is below. I travel for business weekly and I've never seen such blatant discrimination. I'm happy to provide a witness statement. You're handling this with incredible grace. Jasmine tucked the note into her purse, oddly moved by this stranger's solidarity. Over the next several minutes, other passengers found subtle ways to offer support, a sympathetic smile, a napkin passed across the aisle, a quiet word of encouragement when crew members weren't looking. What none of them knew, what even Jasmine didn't fully understand, was that Devin Washington wasn't just wealthy. Washington Innovations had revolutionized cloud computing, developed cutting-edge AI applications, and created the operating system used in 60% of the world's smartphones. The company's market capitalization exceeded the GDP of many small nations. And 6 months ago, they had quietly added Atlantic Airways to their portfolio of subsidiaries. Jasmine and Devin had met 5 years earlier when his mother suffered a rare brain aneurysm. Every specialist had declared it inoperable until Jasmine, then a rising star neurosurgeon, had developed a novel approach that saved the older woman's life. Devin had been struck not just by Jasmine's brilliance and beauty, but by her compassion and determination to help patients that others had given up on. Their shared experiences as Black professionals navigating predominantly white spaces had forged a deep bond. Both had adopted the same philosophy: document the discrimination, then work for systematic change rather than individual exceptions. Making them treat us better because they know we're rich doesn't fix the system, Devin had once explained to a friend who suggested leveraging his wealth more visibly. It just reinforces that respect is something that has to be purchased rather than freely given based on human dignity. Now, as Atlantic Airways Flight 2187 began its descent into Chicago, Jasmine noticed the crew had shifted strategies. Beverly was now documenting Jasmine's every move in a small notebook, clearly preparing a defensive narrative for the complaint they anticipated. What Beverly couldn't know was that her career wasn't just in jeopardy. It was already over. As the aircraft's wheels touched down on Chicago's runway, the professional consequences of her actions were already in motion, orchestrated by a man whose name never appeared on the airline's organizational chart, but whose authority exceeded everyone on it. Justice was about to be served at 30,000 feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago O'Hare International Airport," announced Beverly, her voice carrying through the cabin as the aircraft taxied toward the gate. "Local time is 11:35 a.m. with partly cloudy skies and a temperature of 74 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign." As passengers gathered their belongings in anticipation of deplaning, Beverly made an additional announcement. Certain passengers in the first-class cabin are requested to remain seated upon arrival. A representative from airline management will be boarding to address a situation that occurred during our flight. She shot a triumphant glance at Jasmine, clearly believing the situation referred to Jasmine's complaint and anticipated removal. Several passengers exchanged confused looks while Andrea gave Jasmine a reassuring nod. The aircraft door opened, and instead of the usual ground crew, 3 uniformed security personnel boarded, followed by a tall black man in an impeccably tailored suit. The security team moved with purpose, while the man in the suit surveyed the cabin with calm authority. Beverly's smile faltered. This wasn't the gate agent or customer service representative she had expected. The man approached Jasmine first. "Dr. Washington, I'm Jordan Phillips, Vice President of Customer Experience for Atlantic Airways. On behalf of the airline, I want to personally apologize for your experience today." Beverly's triumphant expression collapsed into confusion. "Security will escort you off the aircraft first," Jordan continued, addressing Jasmine. "We have a private lounge prepared where you can refresh and collect replacement materials for your presentation." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, gathering her damaged belongings. Jordan turned to face the cabin crew. "Beverly Winters, Shannon Miller, Tyler Brooks, and William Thompson, you are all placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation of today's events. Security will escort you to Human Resources for preliminary statements." Beverly's face drained of color. "What? There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake, Ms. Winters," Jordan interrupted firmly. "We have received multiple reports and evidence of discriminatory treatment, harassment, and failure to maintain a safe environment for all passengers." Jordan then addressed Richard Coleman, who was attempting to slip past unnoticed from his relocated seat. "Mr. Coleman, airline security would like to speak with you regarding the assault on Dr. Washington. The Chicago Police Department has been notified and will determine if charges are warranted." "Assault?" Coleman sputtered. "It was an accident. I tripped." "We have video evidence suggesting otherwise," Jordan replied coolly. "Security will take your statement." Are you shocked by this unexpected turn of events? Comment number 1 if you think Beverly and her crew got exactly what they deserved, or number 2 if you believe the punishment was too severe. Hit that like button if you're satisfied seeing immediate consequences for discrimination. Have you ever witnessed someone powerful come to the defense of someone being mistreated? Subscribe to see the full extent of what happens when a billionaire decides to transform an entire industry after his wife experiences racism. Jordan turned to the remaining passengers. If any of you witnessed today's events and are willing to provide statements, our team would greatly appreciate your assistance. Please see the customer service representatives at the gate. Ms. Chen, we would particularly value your recorded evidence. Andrea nodded. I'll provide everything I have. As security escorted a shell-shocked Beverly and her colleagues off the aircraft, Jordan accompanied Jasmine toward the exit. In the jet bridge, away from other passengers, he spoke quietly. Mr. Washington sends his apologies for not being here in person. He's on his way from San Francisco now. Jasmine's eyes widened. Devin is flying in. His acquisition meeting was concluded immediately when he learned what happened, Jordan explained. But there's something else you should know. Mr. Washington didn't just call in a favor with Atlantic Airways. What do you mean? Atlantic Airways is a Washington innovations company. Your husband acquired it 6 months ago. Jasmine stopped walking, genuinely stunned. "Devon owns the airline? He never told me." "It was a quiet acquisition through subsidiary holdings," Jordan explained. "He planned to improve the technology infrastructure gradually. Very few people know about his ownership." The realization dawned on Jasmine. "So when Beverly and the others learn who I'm married to, they'll understand the magnitude of their mistake," Jordan confirmed. But Mr. Washington was explicit in his instructions. "This isn't about who you're married to. This is about addressing a pattern of behavior that never should have been tolerated for any passenger." Jasmine was escorted to a private lounge where, true to Devon's word, everything she needed awaited her. A new laptop preloaded with her presentation, a selection of professional attire in her size, and a team ready to ensure her conference appearance proceeded flawlessly. As she changed into a fresh outfit, her phone buzzed with messages from colleagues at the conference wondering about her delayed arrival. None of them could have imagined the drama unfolding behind the scenes. Meanwhile, in a sterile conference room elsewhere in the airport, Beverly sat stunned as the human resources director explained the severity of the situation. "We've received multiple passenger statements and video evidence," the director explained. "This appears to be part of a pattern of behavior that violates not only company policy, but potentially federal law regarding discrimination in public accommodations." "This is absurd," Beverly protested. That woman was being difficult. She was making accusations. "Ms. Winters," the HR director interrupted, "I strongly advise you to consult with legal representation before making further statements. The evidence is substantial and concerning." Outside in the main terminal, news crews had already gathered. Somehow word had leaked that a major discrimination incident had occurred on an Atlantic Airways flight, involving a prominent neurosurgeon and resulting in the immediate suspension of multiple crew members. Jordan Phillips addressed the media with careful precision. "Atlantic Airways is conducting a thorough investigation into allegations of discriminatory treatment on Flight 2187. We take these matters extremely seriously and are committed to providing a respectful environment for all passengers. We will share further details once our investigation is complete." What he didn't mention was that Devon Washington's private jet was already halfway to Chicago, carrying not just the tech billionaire, but a team of civil rights attorneys, diversity consultants, and corporate restructuring experts. This wasn't going to be just about one flight crew's behavior anymore. Devon Washington was about to use this incident as a catalyst for industry-wide transformation, starting with the airline he quietly owned. The stage was set for a reckoning that would reach far beyond Beverly Winters and her crew, one that would force an entire industry to confront its deeply rooted biases and practices. 48 hours after the infamous Flight 2187, Jasmine stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Chicago Medical Conference Center, presenting her groundbreaking neurological research to 500 of the world's top neurosurgeons. Despite the ordeal she'd endured, her presentation was flawless, calm, authoritative, and potentially life-saving for countless future patients. "By approaching the tumor from this modified trajectory," she explained, gesturing to the complex 3D rendering on the screen behind her, "we've been able to increase complete resection rates by 37%, while reducing post-operative neurological deficits by over 50%. The audience watched in rapt attention. Several prominent neurosurgeons were already making notes to implement her techniques in their own practices. None of them knew about the airline incident that had nearly prevented her from delivering this presentation. Jasmine had compartmentalized the experience to focus on what truly mattered: advancing medical care for her patients. Meanwhile, across town in the corporate headquarters of Atlantic Airways, a very different scene was unfolding. The 30th floor conference room had been transformed into an investigation command center. Digital displays showed timelines, passenger statements, and video evidence. A team of external civil rights auditors worked alongside the airline's internal compliance officers, reviewing not just Flight 2187, but years of complaint records and employee evaluations. Devon Washington sat at the head of the table, his usual casual tech entrepreneur attire replaced by a sharply tailored suit. He radiated calm intensity as Jordan Phillips presented the preliminary findings. "The investigation has uncovered a deeply concerning pattern," Jordan explained, bringing up a data visualization on the main screen. Beverly Winters has accumulated 37 passenger complaints over her 22-year career, with 29 coming from passengers of color. Until now, these complaints were handled individually, with no one connecting the dots to reveal the pattern. And the others? Devin asked. Shannon Miller has 8 complaints in her 4 years, all involving minority passengers. Tyler Brooks has 11 in 6 years, 9 involving minorities. William Thompson has 23 in his 15 years as purser, with 19 from minority passengers. Devin nodded thoughtfully. And this compares to other crew members how? The average flight attendant receives approximately 1 complaint per 5 years of service, Jordan replied. These crew members are statistical outliers by factors of 20 to 30. What about our hiring and promotion practices company-wide? Devin asked. A diversity consultant named Dr. Maya Richardson took over the presentation. Atlantic Airways has significant disparities in both hiring and advancement. Only 7% of pilots are people of color, compared to a qualified candidate pool of 23%. Flight attendants show better diversity in hiring, but stark disparities in who advances to purser and management positions. The Poissum investigation had expanded far beyond a single incident, revealing systemic issues throughout the organization, exactly as Devin had suspected. Across the city, Beverly Winters sat in her attorney's office, watching her career implode in real time. As news reports covered the expanding investigation, her lawyer, an airline employment specialist named Harold Gardner, looked grim. The evidence doesn't look good, Beverly, he admitted. Multiple passenger videos, consistent witness statements, and now they're reviewing your entire employment history. This is a witch hunt, Beverly insisted. That woman was being difficult. I treated her the same as anyone. Harold sighed. The videos suggest otherwise, and now we've learned that the passenger you mistreated is Dr. Jasmine Washington, one of the country's leading neurosurgeons. She was flying to deliver a keynote address at an international medical conference. How was I supposed to know that? Beverly demanded. You weren't, Harold replied. That's precisely the point. You made assumptions based on her appearance, and those assumptions were wrong. The attorney hesitated before continuing. There's something else you should know. Atlantic Airways was recently acquired by Washington Innovations. Beverly looked confused. The tech company? What does that have to do with anything? The CEO and founder of Washington Innovations is Devin Washington, Dr. Jasmine Washington's husband. The color drained from Beverly's face as the full magnitude of her actions sank in. She had discriminated against the wife of her company's owner, a billionaire with the resources and motivation to investigate every aspect of the airline's operations. Meanwhile, at Chicago Police Headquarters, Richard Coleman was facing his own reckoning. The corporate executive had been identified as a vice president at Sky Global Airlines, a direct competitor to Atlantic Airways. His company had placed him on administrative leave pending investigation into whether his harassment of Jasmine had been a case of corporate sabotage gone wrong. Detective Alicia Rodriguez reviewed the video evidence with Coleman and his attorney. The footage clearly shows you deliberately pouring your drink on Dr. Washington, Mr. Coleman. Multiple witnesses have provided statements confirming you made racist comments throughout the flight. It was an accident, Coleman insisted, though his confident demeanor had crumbled considerably since the flight. An accident that occurred after hours of documented harassment and racist comments? Detective Rodriguez replied skeptically. The state's attorney will determine whether to pursue assault charges, but I should inform you that we're also investigating potential hate crime enhancements. Across town, Andrea Chen had organized a coalition of passengers from Flight 21A7 who had witnessed the discrimination. They had created a shared document detailing their observations and were making themselves available for interviews with investigators. This isn't just about one bad flight attendant, Andrea explained to the group gathered in her hotel suite. This is about a culture that allowed this behavior to continue unchecked for years. How many other passengers experienced what Dr. Washington experienced, but didn't happen to be married to someone with the power to demand accountability? The story had gone viral across social media platforms with the hashtag #YarJusticeForJasmine. Video clips from the flight showed Beverly's dismissive treatment, Coleman's harassment, and the crew's failure to intervene. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict, and it wasn't favorable to Atlantic Airways. Sensing the shifting winds, Beverly attempted damage control with a tearful television interview on a local Chicago station. "I've dedicated my life to customer service," she claimed, dabbing at her eyes. "This was all just a terrible misunderstanding. I would never discriminate against anyone." But even as she spoke, leaked employee records appeared online showing that Beverly had been quietly reprimanded multiple times over her career for customer service issues involving minority passengers. The airline had repeatedly documented problems, but had never taken substantial action, until now. At Washington Innovation's headquarters in San Francisco, a team of data scientists was conducting a comprehensive analysis of customer complaints across the entire airline industry, using machine learning algorithms to identify patterns of discrimination that had previously gone undetected. "We're seeing industry-wide issues," reported the lead data scientist to Devon via secure video conference. "When we control for all other factors, complaints from minority passengers are 68% more likely to be dismissed without action compared to identical complaints from white passengers." This was exactly the kind of systematic evidence Devon had been looking for, not just to address one incident or even one airline, but to drive fundamental change throughout an entire industry. Meanwhile, Jasmine had completed her conference, presentations to widespread acclaim. As she packed her materials in her hotel room, she struggled with the sudden public attention. Her phone constantly buzzed with interview requests from major news outlets. Her work inbox overflowed with messages of support from colleagues and patients. The incident had thrust her into an unwanted spotlight that threatened to overshadow her medical achievements. Devon arrived at her hotel room, immediately embracing her. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "Your presentation is already being called groundbreaking." Jasmine sighed, leaning into his embrace. "That should be the story, not what happened on that flight." "It will be," Devon assured her. "But first, we have an opportunity to address something that affects countless travelers every day. The question is, are you willing to use this moment to push for broader change?" Jasmine thought about all the patients who would benefit from her research, many of them people of color who face their own discrimination in healthcare. She thought about the subtle and not so subtle barriers she had overcome throughout her career. She thought about Beverly Winters and how many other travelers had endured similar treatment without the power to demand accountability. "What did you have in mind?" she asked. Devon smiled, recognizing the determination in his wife's eyes, the same determination that had led her to pioneer surgical techniques others had deemed impossible. "Something that will transform not just one airline, but an entire industry," he replied. "Starting tomorrow." The Atlantic Airways Board of Directors convened an emergency session, anxiety permeating the ornate conference room. Most had learned of Devon Washington's ownership stake only hours earlier, when the reclusive tech billionaire had requested, or more accurately, commanded, this meeting. The board members shifted nervously in their leather chairs as Devon entered, followed by Jasmine and a team of executives from Washington Innovations. The power dynamic was immediately apparent. This wasn't a discussion among equals, but a reckoning. "Good morning," Devon began, his calm voice belying the gravity of the situation. "I acquired Atlantic Airways 6 months ago with plans for gradual technological improvements. Instead, I find myself addressing a culture of discrimination so deeply embedded that it has become invisible to those leading this company." He activated the room's display screens, showing comprehensive findings from the week-long investigation. The data was damning. Systemic patterns of discrimination in hiring, promotion, customer complaint resolution, and in-flight treatment. "This isn't about one incident or one flight crew," Devon continued. "The treatment my wife experienced was merely a symptom of institutional failures that have persisted for decades." The board chair, Eleanor Harrington, attempted to salvage the situation. "Mr. Washington, we are deeply troubled by what occurred and are committed to addressing." "With respect, Ms. Harrington," Devon interrupted. "Your commitment comes only after exposure. Our investigation revealed 17 previous complaints against Beverly Winters specifically related to discriminatory treatment. All were dismissed or addressed with additional training, That clearly changed nothing. Jasmine stepped forward. I'm not here seeking special treatment because of who my husband is. I'm here because no passenger should experience what I experienced, regardless of their connections or resources. Devon nodded. The investigation has been thorough. Beverly Winters' employment history shows a pattern of complaints from minority passengers spanning her entire career. On screen appeared Beverly's complete employment file, performance reviews noting customer service challenges with certain demographics, but awarding promotions nonetheless. Passenger complaints consistently dismissed as misunderstandings, and internal emails revealing her prejudiced views that had somehow never triggered disciplinary action. Shannon Miller and Tyler Brooks were clearly following Beverly's example, having been trained under her mentorship, Devon continued. And William Thompson, as purser, enabled this behavior through willful blindness at best, active participation at worst. The evidence against Richard Coleman was equally damning. Investigators had uncovered communications suggesting his harassment of Jasmine may have been partly motivated by corporate espionage, an attempt to gather intelligence on Atlantic Airways' operations for his employer, Sky Global Airlines. The decisions regarding these individuals have already been made, Devon announced firmly. Beverly Winters, Shannon Miller, Tyler Brooks, and William Thompson are permanently terminated, effective, immediately with cause. The board members exchanged glances, recognizing they had no real authority to challenge this decision. However, Devon continued, individual terminations are merely addressing symptoms. The disease runs deeper. Therefore, I am announcing a complete overhaul of Atlantic Airways leadership, policies, training, and corporate culture. He outlined a comprehensive transformation plan. New leadership with demonstrated commitment to inclusive practices, mandatory bias training with actual accountability measures, revised complaint procedures with independent oversight, and transparent diversity metrics in hiring and promotion. Additionally, Devon announced, I'm establishing the Air Travel Equity Initiative with initial funding of $100 million to address discrimination across the entire industry. As the meeting continued, Beverly Winters was facing her own crisis across town. Her tearful television interview had backfired spectacularly as journalists uncovered her history of complaints. Far from generating sympathy, she had become the face of unchecked discrimination in the airline industry. Her attorney delivered the final blow that morning. They're terminating you with cause, Beverly. Given the evidence, we have no grounds to contest it. This is outrageous, Beverly exploded. 22 years of service and they throw me away over one passenger's complaints? Not one passenger, her attorney corrected. The investigation identified 43 separate incidents with documented patterns of discriminatory behavior. And it wasn't just any passenger you mistreated, it was the wife of the company's owner. How was I supposed to know who she was married to? Beverly demanded. You weren't, the attorney replied simply. That's precisely the point. You shouldn't treat any passenger differently based on their race, regardless of who they are or who they're connected to. Richard Coleman's situation had deteriorated even further. His employer had terminated him after confirming he had indeed been gathering competitive intelligence, though they insisted they hadn't authorized harassment or assault. Multiple passengers from Flight 2187 had filed police reports regarding his behavior, and the district attorney was considering assault charges with hate crime enhancements. Meanwhile, Andrea Chen had emerged as an unexpected hero of the story. Her quick thinking in documenting the discrimination had provided crucial evidence for the investigation. When Devon learned of her role, he offered her a position on Atlantic Airways' newly formed Passenger Advocacy Board, a group that would provide direct oversight of customer experience and complaint resolution. Your willingness to speak up when others stayed silent made all the difference, Devon told her during a private meeting. We need more voices like yours in positions of influence. For Jasmine, the aftermath of the incident had been complicated. While she appreciated the swift action taken against those responsible, she had never sought public attention for anything other than her medical research. Now, her name and face appeared in news reports nationwide, often with more focus on the airline incident than on her groundbreaking surgical techniques. I don't want to be known as the black doctor who got Coca-Cola poured on her, she confided to Devon one evening. "I want to be known for saving lives." "You will be," Devon assured her. "But you have an opportunity here to save lives in a different way. Discrimination in travel may seem trivial compared to your work in the operating room, but it's part of a larger system that affects people's access to opportunities, including healthcare." Jasmine considered this perspective. Throughout her career, she had focused on individual patients, developing techniques to save those deemed unsavable. Perhaps this incident offered a chance to address systemic issues that affected countless people in less visible but equally important ways. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. "The Air Travel Equity Initiative needs a chairperson," Devon replied. "Someone with moral authority, intelligence, and personal experience with the issue. Someone who can't be dismissed as having a financial stake in the outcomes." Jasmine understood immediately. "You want me to lead it?" "Only if you want to," Devon clarified. "Your surgical work remains your priority. But this initiative could benefit from your leadership, even in a limited capacity." As Jasmine considered the offer, media reports emerged detailing the Washington, D.C. family's history of quiet activism. Despite their enormous wealth, they had consistently worked behind the scenes to address systemic inequities, funding scholarships for underrepresented students, investing in businesses in underserved communities, and using their influence to open doors previously closed to people of color. This revelation transformed the public narrative. Rather than a story about a privileged couple using their power for revenge, it became a story about dedicated changemakers leveraging an unfortunate incident to drive necessary reforms. Beverly, watching this narrative shift from her apartment, where she now spent days sending out unsuccessful job applications, decided on a desperate countermeasure. She filed a wrongful termination lawsuit, claiming she was the victim of reverse discrimination and that Atlantic Airways had made her a scapegoat to appease a powerful owner. Her lawsuit seemed doomed from the start. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and public opinion had solidified against her. Nevertheless, she proceeded, unwilling to accept responsibility for her actions or recognize the harm she had caused. As news of the lawsuit broke, Jasmine was reminded of a formative experience from her second year of medical school. A professor had consistently undermined her work, questioned her presence in the program, and created barriers that didn't exist for her white classmates. When she had finally gathered enough evidence to file a formal complaint, the professor had responded with indignation rather than reflection, claiming Jasmine was playing the race card to compensate for academic shortcomings. The experience had taught Jasmine an important lesson. Those who discriminate often see themselves as victims when held accountable. True change requires not just addressing individual actors, but transforming the systems that enable and protect them. With this realization, Jasmine made her decision. She would accept the role of chairperson for the Air Travel Equity Initiative, balancing it with her continued surgical practice and research. The final confrontation with Beverly was yet to come, but the stage was set for a transformation that would extend far beyond one flight crew or even one airline. The reckoning had begun, and its consequences would reshape an entire industry. 6 months had passed since the infamous Flight 2187. Atlantic Airways had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis under new leadership. The executive team now reflected the diversity of its passenger base. Comprehensive bias training had been implemented for all employees, with real consequences for non-compliance. A transparent complaint system allowed passengers to track the resolution of their concerns, and quarterly diversity metrics were published publicly. The airline's customer satisfaction scores had risen dramatically. Employee morale had improved, as toxic elements were removed, and a more inclusive culture took root. What had begun as a crisis had transformed into an opportunity for meaningful change. Jasmine Washington stood at the podium in Atlantic Airways headquarters, addressing the inaugural conference of the Air Travel Equity Initiative. Before her sat representatives from every major airline, government regulators, civil rights organizations, and travel industry leaders. 6 months ago, I boarded a flight as a neurosurgeon heading to present life-saving research, she began. I was met with suspicion, hostility, and ultimately assault. Not because of anything I did, but because of assumptions made about who I was based on the color of my skin. The room was silent, captivated by her poised delivery and the power of her story. What happened to me that day happens to countless travelers every day, most without the resources or connections to demand accountability. Today, we begin the work of ensuring that air travel, a public accommodation protected by civil rights laws, truly serves all members of the public with equal dignity and respect. Under Jasmine's leadership, the initiative had already secured commitments from 11 major airlines to implement reforms similar to those at Atlantic Airways. The Federal Aviation Administration had announced new reporting requirements for discrimination complaints. Travel websites had begun including diversity and inclusion ratings alongside their traditional metrics of timeliness and comfort. After the conference concluded, Jasmine prepared to board a flight to a medical symposium in Boston. As she walked through O'Hare International Airport, a familiar face appeared in her path. Beverly Winters, now working as a customer service representative for a budget airline. After her wrongful termination, lawsuit had been dismissed with prejudice. Their eyes met in a moment of mutual recognition. Beverly's expression hardened with resentment, showing no sign of reflection or remorse, despite the public exposure of her behavior and its consequences. "Dr. Washington," Beverly acknowledged stiffly, professionally obligated to be civil in her new role but unable to hide her animosity. "Ms. Winters," Jasmine replied with dignity. "I hope you're satisfied," Beverly said, unable to resist. "You destroyed my career." Jasmine regarded her calmly. "No, Ms. Winters. Your actions destroyed your career. The only difference between what happened to you and what has happened to countless others who engaged in similar behavior is that your actions were finally documented and addressed." "I treated you like any other passenger," Beverly insisted, clinging to her self-justification. "The videos, witness statements, and your own employment history prove otherwise," Jasmine replied. "But this was never about just you or just me. This was about changing a system that allowed behavior like yours to continue unchecked for decades." Jasmine could have walked away then, but something compelled her to offer one final thought. "The world is changing, Ms. Winters. You can change with it, or you can be left behind clinging to prejudices that diminish not only those you target, but yourself as well. That choice remains yours." With that, Jasmine continued toward her gate, leaving Beverly to consider or more likely reject this perspective. Elsewhere, Richard Coleman was facing the consequences of his actions more directly. After being fired from Sky Global Airlines, he had been unable to secure comparable employment in the industry. Multiple lawsuits from passengers on Flight 21A7 had depleted his savings. His reputation was in tatters, with the video of his assault on Jasmine appearing in training materials throughout the industry as an example of unacceptable passenger behavior. Andrea Chen had embraced her role on Atlantic Airways' Passenger Advocacy Board and had expanded her influence beyond a single airline. She had developed a rating system for inclusive travel experiences that was now integrated into major booking platforms. Travelers could review airlines not just for comfort and timeliness, but for equitable treatment, creating market pressure for continued improvement. Devin Washington had expanded his initiative beyond airlines to other companies in his vast portfolio. From tech firms to manufacturing plants to retail chains, he was methodically addressing cultures of discrimination wherever he found them. His approach was consistent: thorough investigation, accountability for bad actors, and systemic reforms to prevent recurrence. For Jasmine, the balance between her medical career and her new advocacy role had proven challenging but rewarding. Her surgical innovations continued to save lives in operating rooms across the country. Meanwhile, her work with the Air Travel Equity Initiative was improving experiences for millions of travelers and creating pathways for other industries to follow. One afternoon, as Jasmine boarded an Atlantic Airways flight to a medical conference, she experienced a powerful full-circle moment. The new head flight attendant was a familiar face, one of the passengers who had spoken up in her defense on Flight 2187 6 months earlier. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Washington," the woman said warmly. "It's an honor to have you with us today." The genuine respect in her voice wasn't based on Jasmine's connection to the airline's owner, but on recognition of her as a human being deserving of dignity, the basic courtesy that should be extended to every passenger. As Jasmine settled into her seat, she reflected on the journey from victim to catalyst for change. The incident that could have been merely a painful memory had instead become the spark for transformation, reaching far beyond one flight or one airline. Her phone buzzed with a message from a young black medical student she had been mentoring, AC Swai. Brilliant young woman facing many of the same barriers Jasmine had navigated years earlier. The message included a photo of an acceptance letter to a prestigious neurosurgical residency program. "I got in," the message read. "Thank you for showing me it was possible." Jasmine smiled, thinking about the dual legacy she was building. Lives, saved through her medical innovations, and barriers, removed through her advocacy. Neither path would have been possible without the resilience she had developed facing and overcoming discrimination throughout her life. As the aircraft lifted into the clouds, Jasmine opened her tablet to review her presentation for the upcoming conference. The final slide contained a new addition, her recent appointment to Atlantic Airways' Board of Directors, where she would help ensure the changes implemented remained permanent. The transformation was far from complete. No single initiative could eradicate prejudices built over centuries, but meaningful progress had been made. A moment of discrimination had been transformed into an opportunity for systemic change, creating ripples that would continue expanding long after the initial incident was forgotten. What do you think about how Jasmine handled this situation? Was justice truly served? Comment below with your thoughts on how discrimination should be addressed in public spaces. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their appearance, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who transform moments of injustice into catalysts for positive change. And please share this with someone who needs to understand the impact of bias in everyday interactions. Thank you for listening to this story. May we all have the courage to speak up when we witness injustice and the wisdom to address its root causes, rather than just its symptoms. This story teaches us that true change requires both personal dignity and systemic action. Dr. Jasmine Washington faced discrimination with composure, documenting evidence rather than responding with anger. Her approach demonstrates that maintaining your professionalism in the face of prejudice preserves your power. The transformation came not just from individual consequences for Beverly and her crew, but from addressing the underlying systems that allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. For years, Devon's response shows that effective change targets patterns, not just incidents. We also learn that privilege and power can be wielded responsibly, not for revenge, but for creating equity. The Washingtons used their resources to implement changes that would benefit all travelers, not just themselves. Perhaps most importantly, the story reminds us that bystanders have tremendous power. Andrea's decision to document and speak up made accountability possible. One voice can inspire others to break their silence. Finally, we see that discrimination often persists because systems lack transparency and accountability. When Beverly's pattern of behavior was finally exposed and measured against clear standards, the truth became undeniable. Real change happens when we move from anecdotes to evidence, from isolated incidents to identified patterns. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wondered whether to speak up? Share your experience in the comments below. What would you have done if you were on Flight 2187? Hit that like button if you believe in standing up for others even when it's uncomfortable. Subscribe for more powerful stories about overcoming injustice and creating meaningful change. And please share this video with someone who needs to understand how everyday discrimination affects real people. Thank you for listening. May we all have the courage to document, speak up, and work toward systems that treat everyone with equal dignity and respect.